What's good, family? Bringing some good fruit. This video is going to be about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, shown to John in his revelation of the Messiah that is depicted in Revelations. So for those that don't know, the horsemen are revealed in the unbinding of this scroll that only the slain lamb or the Messiah can unravel. And upon this scroll, there are 7 seals. Of these 7 seals, 4 of them are the horsemen of the apocalypse. John, being exiled on the island of Patmos, received this vision at around 95-96 AD. This video is going to be my analysis through looking at history where we can see these horses already on earth today. My personal revelation is that these are spirits that are to come rather than actual horses. Moving forward to this first horse that John saw was a white horse. In Revelation chapter 6, John portrays it to being a white horse with a king as its rider with a bow in its hand, and he rode out as a conqueror on conquest. What other than the colonial era being that sign in history? For me, I started with the Spanish in the Canary Islands in around 1450 AD, all the way to the end of World War II in 1945. This era of conquest, I would say, lasted about 450 years. This is 1,850 years after John had this vision on the island of Patmos. So how did this colonial era start? After the fall of Rome in around 400s AD, we have Germanic tribes taking over, later instituting their own kingdoms. We have the kingdom of the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, the Franks, the Vandals, and so forth. With these kingdoms growing and wanting their own territories, their own land, we get this idea and this mindset of continual expansion, literally conquering the whole world. Moving forward in history, in the Iberian Peninsula, which is modern day Spain, we have the countries that start this colonial conquest. We're going to be looking at the kingdom of Castile and the kingdom of Aragon. Eventually they unify through a marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella, unifying these two kingdoms and eventually swallowing up the other kingdoms until it's only Portugal versus Spain. Spain, in efforts to expand their territory, seek other land. One of these methods is to try and get into the trade route of the Indian Ocean, the land of spices. As they seek more territory, the first form of this colonial slavery we can see being off of the west coast of Africa in the Canary Islands in around the 1450s. I just want to point out the concept of slavery is something that did exist prior to colonial slavery, but it's different. Slavery before colonial era was more of an indentured servitude. People were well treated, rather than in colonial slavery, a race of people are condemned and prejudiced and demonized just because of the color of their skin, as well for the use of monetary gain. Through this chart, we can see the total land conquered by Spain in their age of conquest. Here in this chart, we see Spain conquering Central America, the lower parts of North America, the west coasts of South America, and as well as parts of the Philippines. For the Portuguese colonial empire, we see them inhabiting land of most of the coasts of Africa, as well as India, Brazil area, and again, some parts of Malaysia, Indonesia. To mark the end of the Spanish colonial conquest, we have the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, which is basically a boundary line separating the amount of land that Portugal and Spain can inhabit. Moving forward, we have Britain's colonial conquest. Britain was the largest colonial empire that conquered the most land out of all of the colonial empires. Here we can see them in parts of America with the 13 colonies and Canada, as well as many parts of Africa, the whole of India, Australia, and some parts of Malaysia as well. Moving forward to the last colonial empire that I want to highlight is the French colonization. In this chart, we can see France occupying a big part of Western Africa, some parts of India, a good part of the middle of North America as well, and some parts of Indonesia. In conclusion to this first horse, we have the 3 colonial leaders, France, Britain, and Spain, setting out and conquering parts of the world. This is a clear representation of this horse or spirit being on the earth already. This next horse that John saw was a red horse that represented war. What historically can we see as this spirit of war being on earth today? What came to mind were the world wars and independence wars. Moving forward, we have the 2 world wars, World War I and II. World War II being the biggest war ever with 75 million deaths, and World War I having 40 million deaths. Mind you, John's vision happened in 95-96 AD. World War I, the purpose was Siberian nationalists sought to free some of their allied Slavic slaves. These people, held in Austria-Hungary, led these Siberians to assassinate Archduke Ferdinand, which was heir to the Austrian throne. This sparked a war as well, pulling their allies into wars backing each of these countries up. In World War I, the 2 sides being the Central Powers regarded as the enemy and the allies. Moving forward into World War II, mind you, being the largest war ever out of all of the wars in history. having 75 million deaths, started when Germany invaded Poland, again causing allies of each country to back them up, with the two sides being the Axis and the Allies. Mainly, this war was still a continuation of World War I, just unsettled disputes of territory, land, and politics, again sparking this Second World War. As well, this is where the nuclear bomb first came into play. Other than the world wars, other instances throughout history that we can see this spirit of war. Looking at every nation has experienced some sort of revolutionary war, civil war, and independence war. We got the Chinese Revolution, American Civil War, Revolutionary Wars, French Revolution, we have the Russian Revolution, the Mexican independence, we have the Cold War with Russia and America, and the Boer Wars, which is much of Africa's independence. Lastly, this is just a chart showing different flags and how they changed after these various countries gained their independence from under Britain's colonial rule. Moving forward, this third horse, which represents famine, as well as commonly interpreted as inflation. Revelation chapter 6, John says that two of the angels, the cherubim, call out to this horse and say, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages. This represents inflation. The amount of money that you would make in one day, you could only buy about 2 pounds of wheat and 6 pounds of barley. As well, the second part, they say, do not damage the oil and the wine. Oil and wine spiritually and biblically represent the Holy Spirit's presence. Implies that during this time, those following Yahuwah will not be affected. Historically and presently, we can see this spirit of inflation and famine running rampant in the world today. Venezuela, their economy crashing, as well as Cuba, and I'm sure all of us can personally attest to experiencing some sort of inflation where the price of things cost more than what they used to cost. As well, we can see Zimbabwe having a $20 billion bill. This is inflation. This spirit is already here. Here are just a few statistics just to back up the reality of this spirit already being present in the world today. One of these quotes concerning world hunger states that the world produces enough food to feed its 8 billion people, but yet so many go hungry still. The last horse that John saw was a pale horse, and he says that its rider was named Death, and hell follows right behind it, as well as given power to kill in many ways, about a fourth of the world. Here is just a combination of a few instances throughout my lifetime, minus the bubonic plague, of multiple ways that the world is being affected, mainly by pestilence and war, and even ourselves with obesity. Ultimately, this video is to show just how close we are to the end, and that the end of the world is not something far off. These things are currently unraveling before our eyes as every day goes by. Ultimately, I want to portray that we don't have that much time left. How do we know the end of the world? How do we know the end of the time? Mind you, nobody knows the hour nor the day. Matthew chapter 24, Yahushua says, as we can look at the sky and tell when it's about to rain, so we can tell when it's the end of the days. There will be birth pains of the earth, of creation. There will be turmoil and chaos everywhere. Just as we know when it's time to harvest, we will know the end of days. Peace.
Life and death is in the power of the tongue. Reap what you sow, whether it's right or wrong. Pay what you owe, make it right, carry on. Recover from your weakness, let the word make you strong. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. Reap what you sow, whether it's right or wrong.